No, in the high-stakes world of startups, some stories burn incredibly bright, and some just burn out. Today, we're diving into a real cautionary tale. A story of massive ambition, a near-billion-dollar valuation, and a collapse that sent shockwaves all the way from Singapore to Silicon Valley. This is the story of Zilingo.
Zilingo's path was once seen as the absolute future of fashion. Now, it's a huge lesson in what happens when that growth-at-all-costs mindset goes completely off the rails. So how on earth did a company with so much promise burn out so spectacularly?
To really understand the collapse, you have to go back to the dream. Because before all the scandal, before the liquidation, Zilingo was actually built on a genuinely brilliant idea.
Okay, so picture this. The year is 2015. Co-founder Nkiti Bose is wandering through Bangkok's amazing Chatuchak market. She's surrounded by all these talented designers and incredible fashion, but she sees this one huge problem. Their entire world was limited to the people physically walking past their stalls. They were basically trapped offline.
And that observation, that's where the vision came from. What if you could bring all these merchants online? What if you could give a tiny stall in Bangkok the tools, the supply chain, and the platform to compete on a global stage? The goal wasn't just ambitious, it was pretty inspiring.
And for a while, man, it worked like a charm. The company's growth was just breathtaking. In only 4 years, it went from this cool idea in a market to a massive operation in 8 different countries. They were right on the edge of becoming a unicorn. You know, that super rare startup valued at over $1 billion. And this number shows you just how much the world bought into that vision. By 2019, Zilingo was valued at $970 million. It was the shining star of the entire Southeast Asian startup scene. But as we know, that kind of insane growth always comes at a price. So, as Zilingo got bigger and bigger, its strategy started to shift, and its spending habits, well, they got super aggressive. The chase for growth was about to take a really dangerous turn. This right here, this pivot, was the secret sauce to their hypergrowth. They went from being a simple marketplace for you and me, the consumers, to this complex B2B machine. They were handling everything from factory logistics and inventory to even providing fintech loans for their own merchants. The whole shebang. And oh, did investors love it. We're talking the biggest names in venture capital. Sequoia, Temasek, they poured in over $300 million. I mean, everyone wanted a piece of the next big thing, and confidence in the market was absolutely sky high. But here's the thing. That growth was being fueled by an enormous fire. Zilingo was burning through up to $8 million every single month. There were stories flying around about some seriously lavish spending, like a $1 million influencer trip that apparently brought in almost 0 new users. And this really became the $1 million, or I guess $1 billion question. The drive for growth was all-consuming, but the foundation holding everything up was starting to look seriously shaky.
All that pressure to grow, well, it created the first cracks in the company's shiny exterior. And like it so often does, the trouble started with the numbers, because they just weren't making any sense.
And this is where this story gets really dark. For fiscal year 2021, the company was publicly claiming revenues as high as $190 million. But inside the company, the reality was completely different. Rumor had it that the actual net revenue was only around $40 million. I mean, that gap is absolutely massive. It's deeply alarming.
And look, this wasn't just some one-time clerical error. A really bad pattern started to emerge. Zilingo actually failed to file its mandatory financial reports for 2 years straight. And inside the company, whistleblowers started to raise the alarm. The red flags weren't just popping up anymore, they were impossible to ignore.
Then came the final nail in the financial coffin. A top-tier auditor, KPMG, refused to validate Zilingo's books. For a company that's trying to raise money, that's not just a red flag, it's a fatal blow to your credibility. Game over. But here's the thing. The financial problems? They were just a symptom. The real disease was a complete and total breakdown in leadership, in trust, and in oversight. The whole situation finally just imploded in early 2022. The board suspended CEO Ankiti Bose, pointing to financial irregularities. What came next was this messy, very public war. Accusations were flying everywhere, the leadership team totally fractured, and whatever was left of investor confidence just, poof, evaporated.
Yeah, the collapse wasn't just about business anymore. It was about broken trust and a massive failure of oversight. One source described the chaos perfectly, saying, "The boardroom transformed into a battleground. Power versus reputation, morale versus misstep."
So, what's left in the wreckage of this billion-dollar dream? Well, Zilingo's failure became a harsh wake-up call, offering some critical lessons for the entire startup world. By early 2023, it was all over. The company that promised to be Zara on an API, this incredible platform for any small brand to get access to a global supply chain, was being liquidated. Its assets were sold off for pennies on the dollar. The dream was officially dead. The lessons from all this are crystal clear. First, hype doesn't pay the bills. A great story just couldn't hide that $40 million revenue reality. Second, scaling fast requires serious discipline. That pivot to B2B added a layer of complexity the company just couldn't handle. And finally, governance is the backbone of everything. Without a board that's willing to ask the tough questions, even the brightest stars can fall.
Which leaves us with this final, really crucial question. Zilingo had a brilliant, potentially world-changing idea, but in the end, that just wasn't enough. It's a stark reminder that a vision, no matter how grand it is only as strong as the integrity of its foundation.